The Hero's Journey of Freemasonry. Audio version Part 5. By Jeff Morgan. Copyright The Hero's Journey of Freemasonry, 2025. Jeff Morgan, all rights reserved. This work is a personal exploration of Freemasonry's symbolic and esoteric dimensions. It is not an official publication of, nor endorsed by, any Grand Lodge, Masonic jurisdiction, or recognized Masonic authority. The views expressed are solely those of the author. Chapter 4. The Legacy of the Initiate and the Future of Freemasonry. The Rebuilding of the Temple, the Eternal Work of the Soul. The Raising of the Master Mason, the Beginning of a Lifelong Journey. The raising of the Master Mason is not the conclusion of the Masonic journey. It is the beginning of a lifelong work. The ritual of death and rebirth in the third degree is a call to action, a reminder that the initiate has now assumed the responsibility of building something greater than himself, the inner temple of the soul. Freemasonry teaches that the true temple is not a physical structure but a spiritual edifice, continuously shaped and refined through moral discipline, intellectual pursuit, and the cultivation of wisdom. Just as Solomon's temple, the great symbol of divine order, was eventually destroyed and rebuilt in new forms, so too must the Mason recognize that his own transformation is never complete. The work of self-perfection is an eternal process, requiring constant renewal, reflection, and reconstruction. Unlike operative Masons who built temples of wood and stone, speculative Masons are called to construct a temple of consciousness, one aligned with the universal principles of truth, wisdom, and enlightenment. This process requires continuous effort, self-examination, and a willingness to refine one's character. The lesson of Hiram Abiff, who was struck down before completing his work, reminds the initiate that the great work is never finished in a single lifetime. Just as the temple was left incomplete with the loss of its master builder, the Mason must recognize that his own journey is one of perpetual striving, never reaching a final state of completion, but always building towards something greater. The soul as the living temple. If Solomon's temple is the great symbol of divine perfection, then it follows that each Mason must seek to become a living embodiment of that temple. This teaching is found not only in Masonic tradition, but in many of the great mystical and philosophical systems throughout history. Hermetic and alchemical traditions, the unending great work. In alchemy, the magnum opus, great work, is never fully completed. It is an ongoing process of refinement, transmutation, and ascent toward higher wisdom. Carl Jung describes this process as the individuation of the soul, the constant integration and purification of the self. The Mason, like the alchemist, works to purify the soul and align it with divine truth. Kabbalah, the restoration of the temple within. In Kabbalah, the destruction of Solomon's temple represents the fragmentation of divine unity, and its reconstruction symbolizes the restoration of harmony within the soul and the cosmos. Gershom Scholem notes that the rebuilding of the temple is a spiritual act, achieved by repairing and perfecting the self, thereby contributing to the greater order of creation. Eastern traditions, the eternal ascent. In Buddhist and Hindu teachings, the path to enlightenment is not a final destination, but an eternal ascent toward wisdom, requiring countless lifetimes of refinement and realization. Similarly, the Mason's work does not conclude with the Master Mason degree. It extends beyond the lodge and into every aspect of life. Thus, the rebuilding of the temple is not about restoring a physical edifice. It is about restoring divine consciousness within the individual. Every Mason is both the builder and the temple, responsible for ensuring that his life becomes a sanctuary of wisdom, integrity, and enlightenment. The eternal work of the Master Mason. The Master Mason is called to continue the great work, but what does this mean in practice? How does one actively engage in the rebuilding of the inner temple? 1. Moral and ethical living. A true Mason does not simply study symbols and rituals. He lives them. He embodies truth, justice, and brotherhood, aligning his actions with the divine principles upon which the temple was built. Every word and deed contributes to the construction of his soul's edifice. As Carl Jung observed, true spiritual work involves the integration of one's shadow and the alignment of inner and outer life. 2. The pursuit of knowledge and wisdom. The middle chamber teaches that knowledge is the foundation of enlightenment. The Master Mason understands that learning never ceases and that intellectual and spiritual study are essential tools for refining his inner temple. In the words of Gershom Scholem, the highest wisdom is the realization that the temple of knowledge is constructed stone by stone, thought by thought. 3. service to humanity. Just as the great cathedrals and temples of history were built for the benefit of others, the Master Mason recognizes that his work is not for himself alone. By contributing to the betterment of his community, the fraternity, and the world, he actively participates in the rebuilding of the temple in a higher form. Mircea Eliade notes that in the ancient mystery schools, service to the cosmos was a sacred act. Each act of virtue contributed to restoring divine order. 4. Self-reflection and inner work. The Mason continually examines his thoughts, emotions, and motivations, ensuring that his inner structure remains strong and aligned with divine order. This requires humility, self-discipline, and the courage to acknowledge one's own imperfections. As Jung stated, the work of the soul is never finished, for the soul is infinite. The legacy of the Master Mason, building beyond the lodge. The Master Mason's great work does not end within the walls of the lodge. It extends into the world, into his relationships, and into the contributions he makes to humanity. The true test of Masonic principles is their application in daily life. The Mason becomes a living cornerstone in the temple of humanity, contributing to its elevation through acts of kindness, justice, and wisdom. His life becomes a bridge between the spiritual and the material, demonstrating that the greatest temples are built not with stone, but with character, compassion, and truth. Reflections: the soul's eternal quest. The Master Mason's degree reveals that true initiation is not about acquiring titles or degrees. It is about inner transformation. The initiate, like Hiram Abiff, must die to his lower nature and be raised into a new awareness of his higher purpose. He must recognize that he is both the builder and the temple itself, responsible for ensuring that his soul becomes a place worthy of divine presence. Freemasonry does not offer an end to the journey. It offers a path, one that every initiate must walk for himself. The legend of Solomon's Temple and its eventual destruction reminds us that the work of self-perfection is never truly complete. Just as the ancient temple was rebuilt in new and greater forms, so too must the Mason continually refine and perfect himself, understanding that enlightenment is not a single event, but a lifelong pursuit. This is the eternal work of the Master Mason, not to seek an endpoint, but to engage in the ceaseless labor of self-transformation, knowing that every step forward brings him closer to the divine. The search for the lost word, the ultimate realization of divine wisdom, remains an endless quest, one that every true Mason must pursue with an open heart, a disciplined mind, and an unwavering spirit. In the end, the rebuilding of the temple is not just about the individual Mason. It is about the elevation of all humanity. Every act of wisdom, every lesson learned, and every soul awakened contributes to the greater work of restoring divine harmony in the world. The Master Mason does not merely seek enlightenment for himself. He becomes a light for others, a guiding force in the ongoing construction of the great work. Thus, the journey never truly ends. The hero's path continues beyond the lodge, beyond the symbols, beyond the rituals, leading ever toward the infinite wisdom of the grand architect of the universe.